This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. It's episode 404 of the Craft Beer Brewing Podcast. I'm Jamie Bogner, and joining me for this episode is our contributing editor for Craft Beer and Brewing and the Brewing Industry Guide, Kate Bernot. Welcome back to the podcast, Kate.
Thanks. It's so great to be here.
Earlier this week, our Industry All Access subscribers received in their email inbox this week's subscriber exclusive story that Kate reported. For those of you who are not familiar with this, for the last couple of years, since about 2020, we've had in place the Industry All Access program where we take a digital first approach to media. And Kate and Stan Hieronymus and others, Courtney Eisman, there have been other writers in the past have all contributed alternating weekly stories throughout the course of the year that we shared directly digitally with our All Access subscribers and then pull those together in the form of our quarterly Brewing Industry Guide magazine. So Kate has been a longtime contributor in that program, has written voluminous number of stories for All Access, and continues to report on breaking and long-term trends that affect the industry and affect business operators, brewing, et cetera, et cetera. It's an important thing, and we have, over the last number of years, tried to work on this model of how we can deliver media quickly, impactfully, in a way that helps brewers and brewery operators make decisions in a timely fashion that can impact their businesses. And sometimes that quarterly frequency of a print magazine is not the ideal timing for that. And so taking this digital first approach to media and then pulling it back together in the form of that print magazine, print and digital, I should say, that we then ship out to folks on the industry and All Access Brewing Industry Guide side is an important part of the way that we share information with you. Kate tackled this story that we just finished an issue of the Brewing Industry Guide collecting this, but also earlier this week, those subscribers got her latest story in their inbox. She was parsing this latest industry economic data, but trying to read beyond the surface for a deeper look at what's really going on. I think we've all read the hyperbolic clickbait stories out there about craft beer's demise. Of course, for the first time in almost 20 years, we saw a net decline in operating breweries in the United States last year. Maybe not the only metric we should be looking at in terms of defining what success is in craft beer, but we'll talk about that later. At the same time, we've been hearing anecdotally from a number of brewers, like Neil Fisher of WeldWorks back in episode 400, that they were growing despite these significant headwinds. This cognitive dissonance got us thinking about how data that purports to tell certain truths, but that quote-unquote truth is limited by the nature of how that data is collected. Craft beer in the United States is both big and small. Our primary sources of data only address the biggest channels of the craft beer business, and that leads to potential distortions in perception that potentially have damaging effects for craft beer as a whole. With that in mind, Kate and Joe and I started talking. Kate decided to set out for some answers to the questions that we had. Does this meta-narrative that we've been reading have truth to it? Does it accurately describe the reality that craft brewers are facing? Is there other data that suggests different or more varied truths? And what can we take away from that to build a more full picture of the current state of craft beer? With that in mind, Kate's going to share what she found. But first, if you're looking for a brewery chiller that's worry-free and tough on GWP, then look no further. G&D Chiller's Elite 290 Series chiller uses propane as a natural refrigerant with extremely low global warming potential. This natural, highly efficient refrigerant with near zero GWP will help lower your facility's energy costs and impact on the environment. They're committed to a greener, more efficient future. Visit gdchillers.com to learn more. And it's time to stop worrying about diacetyl with Berkeley Yeast's line of fresh strains. These revolutionary yeast strains are engineered to produce the ALDC enzyme inside the cell, preventing diacetyl before it forms. That means no more lengthy diacetyl rests, just clean, crisp beer that's ready for packaging sooner. Whether you're brewing a classic lager with fresh Ondex or a hazy IPA with fresh London, you'll get ultra low diacetyl levels and let your beer's true flavors shine. The team at Fireforge Craft Beer call it a cheat code and a game changer for their hoppy beers. Learn more at berkeleyyeast.com/fresh. Also, as breweries expand beyond beer into other segments like mocktails and CBD beverages, Old Orchard is here to help. They can formulate custom blends featuring specialty ingredients. Whether trending flavor additions or nostalgic favorites, the next best thing is around the corner at Old Orchard. For more information and free samples, they're waiting at oldorchard.com/brewer. That's oldorchard.com/brewer. Kate, why don't you set the stage for us with some context around the current condition of the craft beer economy? This is something that you've deeply engaged and reported on frequently. So just set the stage for us what informed our conversations and some of our thinking about to take some direction here with this story.
Sure. This story started, I think, from us editors seeing the same top line economic data and headlines that a lot of folks are seeing, which is that craft beer volume and sales are down. You could look at the National Beer Wholesalers Beer Purchasing Index for that. You could look at Brewers Association overall production data for that. You could look at off-premise sales as tracked by a company like Circana and conclude that craft beer is just down across the board. And that is not to say that those numbers are not true. Those numbers are all factually correct. However,
brewery closure numbers being another data point that features into that and has certainly driven a lot of narratives out there popularly today.
Yes, brewery closures outpacing openings for the first time last year. Yet in a market where there are nearly 10,000 craft or American breweries, just those top line headlines are not going to be true for everyone. There will always be exceptions to those trends, and not just individual exceptions, but real pockets of growth and reasons for optimism, even within this landscape. It's simply too broad, and there are too many models for craft breweries today to speak so generally about the state of the entire category like that.
Let's talk a little bit about that. I think that it's something that gets lost frequently in this conversation, but it is something that we have tried to illustrate even through infographics in the Brewing Industry Guide. There is a long tail to breweries in the United States. We often think of a number like 10,000 or close to 10,000 as being, I think it's natural for us to think about them all as being somewhat similar. Yet the reality of that is that of those 10,000, the top 10%, to hit that 10% line, you need to be brewing 1,000 plus, I think about 1,300 barrels of beer per year. And so the bottom 90% of licensed craft brewers in the United States make about 1,300 barrels of beer or fewer per year. The 50% point is at the 300 something barrel point. So half of all of these craft brewers that we talk about as being making up this gigantic number make a very small amount of beer, under 300 something barrels per year. And so that top 1% of brewers, even the top 50 brewers period in the United States, make almost 90% of the volume of craft beer as a whole. And that means that these stories, you can't expect the stories of that bottom 50% of all craft breweries to match, what that top end of craft brewery scale also is.
It also means that top 10% or whatever you want to say of breweries has an outsized effect on the overall production numbers, correct? So when those top breweries are stagnant or contracting, it has an outsized, again, effect on the overall numbers. Yet retailers, business partners, even the general public scanning headlines, reading a tweet, whatever, concludes that craft beer is in crisis, perhaps, or something like that. And this is not to deny the obvious headwinds that the industry faces, but I think this is one of those moments where we have to hold two truths in our head and just be a little more nuanced about how we're thinking about the data. And it kind of behooves these smaller breweries to be able to tell a data-driven story about their resilience and about their success, to counter what their business partners are going to be hearing, again, in some of that chain retail data that might have absolutely nothing to do with that 300 barrel a year brewery that is barely in local distro. And we see it all the time through the case studies that we report for the Brewing Industry Guide, which dive into breweries that are making kind of smart operational decisions. There is such a variety of business models, of financing, of operational choices that breweries are making today to stay relevant and successful. Very few breweries are really that alike. And there are ways to tell positive stories through real data. Matt Gasiach, the staff economist at the Brewers Association, said that in the mid-year BA production report, it looks like about half of reporting breweries have experienced growth. Obviously, maybe a little selection bias there. If you're growing, you're happy to report that you're growing. But certainly there are breweries that are experiencing growth right now, and maybe not seeing that narrative reflected in the top line numbers. Half.
That's a very different narrative than we are seeing publicly represented out there through other media channels.
Again, I really think it behooves those breweries to tell that story and get that story out there, and to use specific data, which again, this becomes a challenge for smaller breweries that can't pay for the big syndicated data. But again, maybe they don't need to, because maybe it's not terribly relevant. But to find ways to look at numbers and production, maybe it's foot traffic growth, maybe it's event attendance. There are ways you can use numbers that show the real picture of what's relevant for your brewery and your business model. And it's not always going to be chain retail data, and it's not always going to be the overall BA production number.
Some of it, in fact, especially given some of the on-premise focus of so many small breweries, is more aligned with, say, the hospitality numbers and the broader hospitality numbers that we see through other data channels like Nielsen, IQ. There are other ways, not scan retail data, but actual hospitality data. That also has its own limitations, and we can't necessarily draw the direct comparison to that. But it just speaks to the idea that we have to take a very broad-based approach to this data. You talked to, or you in the story talk about a presentation that Lester Jones, the chief economist for the National Beer Wholesalers Association, gave, where he strikes and basically underscores this exact point. Tell us about that.
Lester Jones went pretty hard on what he called Stockholm data syndrome in a presentation to the American Craft Cider Association, and he defines Stockholm data syndrome as this over-reliance on retail scan data. And he was making the point to cideries, as well as, this is very relevant to small breweries, that those numbers reflect just one piece of the overall picture, and again, completely miss that on-premise channel completely. For context, that off-premise retail sales data tracked by Circana shows craft beer dollar sales down about 2 and 3% in grocery and convenience stores last year. But Lester Jones makes the point in his presentation that, that is not your Bible. That is not your North Star. You may not even be selling in those channels. You have to embrace a fuller data set and think about, varied sources of data that do reflect the places you are selling beer. Otherwise, you are missing the story. He cited really strong consumer interest right now in travel and dining and sort of experiences, of which the off-premise is a huge one. This is something that I've seen in other economic data. Even though there's a lot of consumer uncertainty right now, people are still willing to spend on experiences, on sort of those on-premise indulgences. And this is a place that, craft beer can very strongly take a seat at that table. And that's a real bright spot for hospitality-focused businesses right now.
Values are also an increasing thing that consumers express in their customer surveys as reasons driving some of their purchasing decisions. We're seeing a lot of that too. Let's talk a little bit more about that in a second. But first, Oregon-based Indie Hops is expanding possibilities for brewers in 2025. Strata, Indie's original hop release, is now available in cold-side flowable hop oil form, Strata Hyper Boost, in coordination with Yakima Chief Hops. Indie Hops T90 pellets established the multi-layered Strata experience, while cryogenic CGX pellets in coordination with Crosby Hops and now Strata Hyper Boost with YCH expand the possibilities. Learn more about Strata and Indie's more recent hop releases at www.indiehops.com. Indie Hops, life is short, let's make it flavorful. And upgrade your fermentation game with Unitank 2.0 from SS Brewtech, featuring a laser-welded cooling jacket for efficient and precise temperature control, an innovative silicone racking arm, and a carbonation stone that lets you carbonate right in the fermenter. Unitank 2.0 is engineered to help you get the most out of your fermentations. Available from 7-gallon up to 1-barrel sizes, Unitank 2.0 will be right at home in your homebrew setup or producing pilot batches at your commercial brewery. Visit ssbrewtech.com to learn more. So let's talk about that. You did, in your reporting, find other factors that do try to explain, because if we look at this how this retail scan data doesn't describe necessarily the current conditions, there is data about the things that are working, where breweries are finding more success. And there are, obviously, if half of these breweries that are reporting their production data to the Brewers Association are reporting an increase in production, there are ways that breweries are making this work. And this is, again, not to take anything away from the real experience that a number of even small breweries are facing. This future that we are experiencing now is unevenly distributed. I think what you have found and what we have found is that there is not a single rule that even suggests what is working in every place that could be applied everywhere all the time universally. It is instead pockets of things that seem to impact in different regions in different ways for different kinds of consumers. Talk about some of the variety that you found in some of the data that suggests ways that breweries are finding ways to counter these trends.
A lot of pockets for growth and stability for craft breweries right now. I think, again, yes, these vary regionally, by business model, by type of consumer, who your base is, what types of beers you make even. But food seems really central to this experience right now. And I don't need to tell breweries that. They've known how much food is a part of their offerings, I would say, especially since the pandemic. Whether you operate your own kitchen, whether it's a food truck, something like that, some semblance of food seems at the core of what's working in beer right now. And I think a lot of this has to do with increasing consumer focus on value. As you mentioned, Jamie, this came out of the National Restaurant Association report, the State of the Restaurant Industry report for 2025. Customers have pent-up demand to visit the on-premise. As I mentioned earlier, people are still seeking these unique hospitality experiences. However, they really are looking for the bang for their buck. They say value is very important. They want to, they don't want to feel like their money wasn't well spent. And I think this is a place that breweries can really excel, because people want this on-premise experience, but they also want to feel like they really stretched their dollar. And I think compared to other types of dining experiences, breweries offer, good portions, a comfortable atmosphere at a reasonable price. You can take the whole family. I think this is a really bright spot that breweries can lean into is this, food experience and offering that value. The National Restaurant Association report also found that across restaurants, loyalty programs are increasingly important for consumers and operators. A majority of operators surveyed by the National Restaurant Association said their loyalty program helped increase customer traffic last year. So breweries probably already have, their mug club or what have you, but I would maybe urge them to even lean more heavily into that in a way that possibly doesn't only capture drinkers and reward one drinker in the family for the loyalty, but can be kind of spread among the whole family, maybe on food benefits and that kind of thing. Again, we know that food is such a central piece to what's succeeding right now. And I think breweries have a really strong license to excel here in what consumers are looking for in food and drink.
It almost feels like a narrative that states that people aren't going out to drink craft beer anymore is, a chainsaw. And, the scalpel take on that would be consumers are going out to drink craft beer less often, but they are still going out to drink craft beer. And what does that mean for a broader industry? It doesn't mean that there isn't success to be found for breweries out there. It just means that for some of those craft beer consumers, instead of going out 3 or 4 times a week to a brewery, they're going out 1 or 2 times a week. And the question is, which are those 1 or 2 breweries that they are going to more frequently? Are they still spreading all of their patronage around and simply going to that same 4 or 5 breweries on a cycle? Or are they continuing to go more often to 1 or 2 of those, less often to 3, 4, or 5? And how does that impact the smaller side of those? And those factors obviously could be quality of product, but I think, as you state, quality of experience, also access to food. What we have found in looking at, in fact, there's an infographic in the new issue of the Brewing Industry Guide, that speaks to this, that ambiance and experience of the actual space is often the most highly reported experience, customer experience factor in, even more so than the quality of beer presentation. And that may be a hard thing for some brewers to understand, but I think that all of these factors can impact whether, they can impact that frequency at which your consumer returns, and not simply hit some binary yes, no, do go, don't go. Again, it's much more complex than that.
I mean, when we think about beer quality, I can enjoy your brewery's beer quality from a can at my house. What is going to get me off that couch and into the brew pub, into the tap room? The beer quality hopefully is the same in the packaged product as on premise. So the real question is ambiance or food or something that I can't bring home. So I think that's kind of hard for some breweries to hear, but it's completely logical from a consumer experience perspective. And Jimmy, what you were saying about sort of frequency of visits, Dr. Jackson Beckham of the Brewers Association had a really great way to think about this in a presentation she gave to the Ohio Craft Brewers Guild earlier this year. She was saying, her personally, back in her craft beer heyday, you used to be able to count on her for 6 pints a week at your tap room, maybe over the course of 2 different visits. And that was because she wanted to try every single new thing and, maybe recorded it in her notes and all this stuff. And now, her enthusiasm for beer has not dimmed, but maybe she's good for about 2 pints a week. But she was saying, you can still sell those 6 pints a week. You just got to find 3 Dr. J's. So it's harder, right? The volume can still be there. You just have to maybe do more outreach to more customers. That volume is maybe going to come from more transactions rather than those old, reliable regulars who are going to sit down and, drink 3 pints on a Friday, 3 pints on a Saturday. So I think that's a really useful way to think about this, is that volume is still there. And maybe it's actually a long-term, could contribute to the health of the category if we spread that volume among more consumers, right? We don't just have our diehards. We have a greater pool of people who casually engage with craft beer rather than it being just a hardcore interest for a narrow few.
Sure, sure. I can see in the off-premise kind of space, there's, two main drivers. That needs to be what quality of the beer itself or value and price. And you have consumers that generally are going to shop on those two things for that beer that they're going to drink at home. And that consumer that's coming out to a place is actually looking for that myriad of additional factors that are well beyond just the the quality of the beer always matters in everything, but the experience needs to be there, and the things that keep them there, like food, that keep them there for, more than one pint, that gets them into 2 or 3 pints. And also then that product mix changes where, if someone is driving, they are drinking different kinds of beers as they are there in a tap room, and then how a brewery prepares their staff to not simply try to push hazy double IPAs, because those are we're seeing all of this, data about those selling at a lower and lower rate within that on-premise space as more of those smaller, easier, lower ABV beers where you can have more than one, but also stick around and pair with food, are working much, much better in that kind of space. But then what you just mentioned about adding new consumers, that does seem to be one of the biggest challenges for craft beer right now. And it seems like the broader message that gets shared about craft beer's decline is certainly not the best enticing message to be, to put out there into a broader communal world if your goal is to create more consumers. It seems like that is almost self-defeating. And the more that we talk about how Gen Z isn't going to breweries and they're just engaging with other things, may become its own self-fulfilling prophecy. Are there any bright spots, amongst this kind of, that the data shows us that there are some breweries or general categories of breweries that are defying some of those trends?
Yeah, the narrative about Gen Z's disinterest in alcohol or craft beer is just so unnuanced and overblown, in my opinion. Gen Z is very eager to create real connection with each other, and to experience shared moments with each other. It's why they love music festivals and kind of like immersive experiences. And again, I think this is a place that breweries really have a license to excel. They are endlessly creative. They are community spaces that are flexible and responsive to the people who visit and who are in their area. It's going to turn you into a little more of an event planner than a brewer. Maybe you have to throw these strange music nights that you didn't think you'd be throwing, or you're doing Charlie XCX versus Billie Eilish karaoke night. I don't know. But breweries are set up for this kind of flexibility. They're set up to put things together pretty quickly. They're almost DIY spaces in a some sense. Again, not all breweries are set up for this, but I think really small breweries can do this very well and can kind of throw spaghetti at a wall a little bit and just see what is resonating with people. What harm is there on a kind of quiet Tuesday night and kind of trying something a little different? And again, I think it's giving young consumers who survey after survey say they want places to be with their friends. They want places they can be that don't cost a lot of money. This generation is very financially conscious at this stage because they're young. They're just kind of getting their feet under them in terms of their careers. So places that they can go.
I can tell you that with my 19-year-old son, his goal right now is to save to buy a house. And
oh my God,
it's the funniest thing in the world. He is a very well-behaved, very financially conservative. And, by the time he is 22, he will probably have the funds that he needs to buy a house. And that would be, at that age, 16 years earlier than I was when I bought my first
house. God bless.
Have
him call me and give me some financial pointers. But yeah, I this generation is pretty aware of the high cost of living, and is looking for places that they can go and just be in public with their friends and not not spend money they don't have. I see a lot of conversation on places like Reddit about young people asking, like, what are third spaces? Where are these places? It costs so much to even sit and have a coffee, drink, and a sandwich at Starbucks. Like, they really are looking for places to just be in public for less money. And I think, pricing pressure is real for small breweries, but if you can kind of position yourself as that affordable place with no cover to come see some music and, decently priced drinks and food, again, I think that's a really strong proposition for young people who can't afford the big stadium concert tickets, but want a reason to go out with friends and see some music.
Sure. In the story, you also talk about how certain brands are using placements in restaurants and using that broader hospitality piece to help expose their brands, to help grow in that same kind of space where getting outside of a hardcore craft beer consumer, or that consumer that you're competing directly with other breweries for, moving outside of that kind of realm and trying to attract other kinds of consumers can be a very important strategy. I'd like to talk about that for a second. But first, did you know that Isuzu trucks have been the best-selling low cab forward trucks in America every year since 1986? That's right. For over 38 years, the legendary durability, remarkable performance, and low cost of ownership of Isuzu trucks have made them a favorite for work truck owners. You may have seen their ultimate craft beer truck that debuted at the Craft Brewers Conference in 2019 and has been there every year since as members of the Brewers Association. They've partnered with breweries, suppliers, distributors alike to support the craft beer industry. Whether you're looking for a self-distribution solution or one to deliver supplies, there's an Isuzu truck that will fit your needs. Go to IsuzuCV.com to check their impressive lineup or visit an Isuzu dealer today and find out why now, more than ever, Isuzu trucks are the trucks you trust for the work you do. Also, protecting your beer's highest quality is crucial to maintain its unique taste and prevent spoilage. Organisms and microbiological testing plays a vital role in that process. Cytiva offers a comprehensive portfolio of laboratory filtration products designed for both lab and production floor use. Their products are portable, affordable, and suitable for any size craft brewing operation, and they support a wide range of applications, including microbiology analysis to detect spoilage organisms during manufacturing through final product release and shelf life studies, general filtration for degassing and yeast removal, and analytical chemical analysis of raw materials and final products. Discover how Cytiva can help you protect the quality of your beer today. Visit beerandbrewing.com/Cytiva. That's CYTIVA to learn more. And if you're launching a brewery or acquiring an existing one, consider our brewery workshop and new brewery accelerator, September 14th through 17th in Fort Collins, Colorado. Over 4 days, we engage in panel discussions, technical brewery tours, networking, and small working group sessions to help you better understand and prepare for the challenges of brewery operation. Tickets are on sale now. Visit breweryworkshop.com for more information and to secure your spot. Kate, let's talk a little bit about how breweries are using outreach placement, maybe not driving volume sales, but using these placements for brand awareness in order to ultimately and eventually turn more sometimes non-beer drinkers into craft beer consumers.
Yeah, if we're talking about reaching customers who may not consider themselves, diehard craft drinkers, the fine dining realm, really interesting space, I think, for beer to assert itself. Now, value does play into this. And I know your listeners are thinking, Kate, how do value and fine dining go together? Allow me to explain. But first, I will say that I got interested in this sphere because in looking at some CGA data by NIQ, we saw that craft's rate of sale in fine dining restaurants improved 6% year over year during the last quarter of 2024. So that's that crucial holiday period. People are going out for these celebratory end of year holiday gatherings, and craft was up 6% during that time in fine dining. So what's going on there? Can't quite parse the 100% reason for this, but I would venture a hypothesis that on fine dining menus where cocktails are, who knows, $15 to $20, bottles of wine, easily 3 figures, even a pretty sophisticated 750 milliliter bottle of some kind of specialty craft beer, it still looks like quite the affordable option. And again, when we're talking about consumers seeking value in the on-premise, again, I think this is a place that breweries who make the kind of product that does well in these fine dining. This is not for everyone. This probably isn't for your 16-ounce double dry hopped IPA that is going to compete with food. But if you produce beers that are food friendly, that have, a presentation factor, maybe in a bottle or what have you, then I think this is a space that, again, isn't going to drive huge volume, but could really be a place to show off kind of culinary bona fides, to argue for craft beer's place at the table, for sure, and to do so in a way that isn't as rigid as, pairings. This beer is for this exact thing, but just beer should be on the table with everything else. That's a story that craft beer can tell. Hey, we are a really beautiful, elegant bottle that costs a third of your most expensive wine or whatever. That's a real story to tell to those buyers in the fine dining fine dining sphere.
In a lot of ways, that mirrors what that we see in the wine beverage world. And I think, it is worth noting that when you look at the dynamics happening right now in both the wine world and the spirits world, the numbers are significantly, measurably worse than they are for craft beer. That the impacts in those markets, especially given the higher price of those products, is very much extinction level for certain companies and brands. Having said that, especially in the wine world, you watch this kind of stratification where the middle class of wine has almost completely evaporated, and so you've got very expensive high-end bottles that only a certain type of consumer or business client trying to impress someone is going to purchase, and no one else is going to buy that $400 bottle of wine. Or you also see growth in this in natural wine, in wine that's produced in a natural, more quick, but also more accessible growth in these brands that are looser, more friendly. They're still bubbly, and they're still fun and effervescent, but they're capped and in clear bottles rather than being corked or in screw tops, and so they feel younger and more fun and vibrant, but also can be produced at a price point that is much, much, much lower. And we often see those now in that $20 to $30 range, where they, just like a fine beer or fine cider, that they are priced equivalently so that people can feel like they are enjoying that experience.
And those wine brands too also tend to not have, this deep terroir baggage, and you don't need to be able to pronounce crazy things to like a pet nat, right? Or to have this catchy orange wine that you like. And I think there's a learning there for craft beer, and again, a chance for it to assert itself in some of those same occasions to say, we have fruit forward, we have balanced acidity, we have food friendliness, we have fun labels that are unpretentious, we have a right to be in some of these same culinary conversations. And as we see, traditional wines interest kind of wane among some younger consumers, or struggle to connect with them on the values that they care about. Again, I think this is a chance for beer to kind of muscle in and reassert itself and say, hey, we can be in those same moments, and maybe it's a more intriguing product for you right now. So take that to your restaurant buyer.
Sure. Now, we talked about values earlier, but values, are increasingly something that consumers, mention as driving purchases. There is an entire category of brewery today that, as you report in the story, is outpacing the norm. Talk to me briefly about that.
Yeah, this is another bright spot in the data and relates directly to perhaps, living your values, offering something new, connecting with consumers who have traditionally not been explicitly invited into the craft beer fold. Members in the National Black Brewers Association, these are Black-owned breweries, members of the NB2A, in 2023 grew their production 19% faster than the broader craft beer industry. The vast majority, 70% of Black-owned breweries make less than 1,000 barrels a year that year in 2023, and they grew 9% faster than similarly sized counterparts. To me, this is, again, a story about, connecting with new consumers, bringing something new to the table, living your values, having a very authentic story and identity to your brewery in a sea where it's hard for consumers to understand why they should choose one IPA versus another. Being a brewery that really stands for something and has a true founder story, which most craft breweries do, I think is ever more important and a really great bright spot. We don't yet have the 2024 data quite yet from the MB2A, but we'll be looking for that soon.
Sure. And I think, as we look at the economy now, there are some broader questions as, larger corporations either abandon values that they did adhere to or, in other ways reinforce and recommit to some of those values and having different kinds of impacts on their consumers. There's certain things that we can watch from that in terms of sales and stock values and watch how those things move. And obviously the scale that we're dealing with here in craft beer is quite a bit smaller. But it does seem anecdotally, looking at some of the ways that those larger companies report, that supporting those values and sticking to those values actually has some significant upside, much more so than we may have otherwise predicted if you were just to ask people about that. But I think that's a great place to start wrapping this up in a big picture sense. What do you think, are some of the core takeaways for, brewery operators today and for the rest of us here in the broader craft beer mediascape, the way that we think about constructing these stories, the ways that breweries communicate out there what's happening in this world of craft beer to their consumers, the way that fellow beer writers and journalists approach the subject and do it in a way that, maybe can or should be more nuanced and also speak to the kind of breadth of experience. What are some of the big takeaways that you might offer here?
Far be it from me to tell anyone how to think, but I find that when I am confronted by just a sea of kind of homogenous headlines or data takeaways, maintaining curiosity and maintaining a desire to keep learning and to go a little deeper always tends to serve me well. I think a takeaway
that's that counterfactual drive, right? If you have an assumption, what would be the counterfactual to that? Is there any validity to that? Can we explore that? And maybe it doesn't take us to a place where we end up, but at least we've explored. Is there an alternate viewpoint that also may be valid or even valid in just differing degrees? And all of these things are worth considering as we think about the way that we craft a narrative here.
100%. Yeah. Again, holding two things in your mind at once. Two things can be true in different ways, to different degrees, for different businesses, et cetera. Another very tangible takeaway, I would always urge craft breweries, craft beverage producers of any sort to really look beyond their own data sets, look beyond even their industry's data sets. There is a lot of insights to be gleaned from looking at hospitality trends, from looking at the National Restaurant Association report, from looking at what's working in a category that is overall down. Look at what's working in wine. What are the takeaways there? Read a distillery publication, read a market report from a broader industry that isn't your own. And I bet there will be takeaways there, or you will identify opportunities where beer is well poised to answer consumer demands right now. So looking beyond your own bubble and just kind of sucking up information from as diverse of sources as you can to find the truth that is right for your business model, right? To find the truth that feels reflective of the kind of setup you have in the operation you're running. Maybe you have much more in common with a distillery or a winery in your area than you do with craft beer trends overall. Or maybe you're really more of a restaurant to a lot of your customers than you are a manufacturing and distributing brewery. So finding those data sources that speak to your operation and help you make better decisions and think more clearly about your business might not always just come from craft beer.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention that if you don't have the time to track down all of those sources yourself, we have an incredible team of writers who are doing this on a weekly basis, going out, finding those sources, trying to find the diverse voices out there, the points and the counterpoints, and explore the spaces between all of those. And if this is something that you find value in and don't have the time to do yourself, we are here to do it for you. You can either visit beerandbrewing.com or brewingindustriesguide.com for more information about our all-access subscriptions that will help bring you this information from phenomenal writers like Kate, Courtney, Stan, and others on a weekly basis. There's my shameless plug, but that is what we're committed to, and we have tried to develop this kind of sense in our reporting and what we do because it is our job to bring you the best information from all of these sources in a way that actually speaks to the truths, plural, that exist, because there are always more than one. And that, I think, is a great place to bring this to a close. G&D Chiller's Elite 290 Series chiller uses propane as a natural refrigerant with extremely low global warming potential. Unlock the ultra-low diacetyl cheat code with fresh strains from Berkeley yeast. Old Orchard's R&D team is ready to work with you on custom blends and specialty ingredients. Indie Hop Strata is available in every format you need, from Hyperboost to CGX pellets and classic T90s. SS Brewtech's Unitank 2.0 will help you get the most from your homebrew and pilot batch fermentations. Isuzu trucks are the trucks you trust for the work you do. Cytiva offers a comprehensive portfolio of laboratory filtration products designed for both lab and production floor use. And learn more about the 2025 Brewery Workshop at breweryworkshop.com. As I mentioned, you can subscribe, whether it's Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine at beerandbrewing.com, whether it's our regular All Access, which includes videos for craft beer and brewing, or our Brewing Industry Guide All Access at brewingindustriesguide.com. There are stories outside of the paywall at Brewing Industry Guide, but we believe deeply in supporting journalists and doing the work that they do so that writers in the beer world can have a career, and that they depend on your support as a subscriber for that, because as in all media, advertising does not pay all of our bills. And, and so we highly encourage you to get out there and subscribe and support what we do. Kate, what are some of the topics on your list that you are currently exploring for, say, future stories in Brewing Industry Guide, Craft Beer and Brewing, and whatnot? Our IPA issue for Craft Beer and Brewing is coming up. Paul, our review coordinator, is in the room next to me unpacking boxes. Almost 400 beers coming in for that one right now. So IPA is top of mind for us, but you engage both on the brewing side with brewers through Beer and Brewing, and also on the business and industry side through brewingindustriesguide.com. What's on top of your agenda right now?
Well, we have the upcoming IPA issue for Craft Beer and Brewing, for which I am diving into the contested question of Midwest IPAs. Are they a distinct thing? If so, what are they? Spoiler alert, they are a distinct thing, and I will tell you all about them. And then for the Brewing Industry Guide, we have some very cool case studies of breweries that are really succeeding. The one that I am working on right now is a brewery that is working across multiple locations, but finding some really cool synergies and efficiencies between all those different pub locations. And also working on our packaging issue and talking about the very nitty gritty, but very important topic of keg fleet management.
Lots of great stuff in the works. Anyway, Kate, thanks for joining me for this episode. If those of you can't tell, Kate and I are both fans of the New York Times Daily podcast. We have done our best to channel that daily energy through this. You did a phenomenal Adam Liptak. I can't say that I've done my best Michael Barbaro, but I have tried to. You certainly did. I have tried to approach it. I've tried to approach it with that kind of gravitas. Great talking with you as always. Talk to you soon. Cheers.
Cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, for those who love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.